What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bronx Pinstripes show. The dust has settled from Thanksgiving. Scott, how you doing? How was your weekend? Did it feel like 40 days and not 4 days like it did for me?
Yeah, because we've been getting over a little bit of a sickness in the Ryan household.
You too?
I probably along with everybody else who has kids, because it's the gauntlet. From the beginning of the school year into Thanksgiving, you start getting all the sicknesses coming back and all the goop. I feel like it's just goop that just like enters your body and then doesn't leave until it gets warm again. But it was good Thanksgiving, and I had my mother in town visiting, so that was nice, and got some good family time with her. And but other than that, man, yeah, stuff my face. You know what I would have realized? I will say this, because we haven't talked since Thanksgiving, right? When you're the actual person or people making the Thanksgiving dinner and doing the whole thing, actually eating the Thanksgiving dinner is really, it misses the mark. It completely misses the mark.
I think you said this last year too, because you cooked last year.
I probably did. Yeah. I actually, it's a new thing. Like, I really don't like it, because I sit down, I'm like, I don't want to eat this anymore. One, I've been eating turkey for the past hour, once it came out. And two, I'm tired. I just want to sit down and watch football.
What time do you eat though? Because this is a big conversation. Like, what did we have this conversation? I had this conversation with someone.
I don't know.
What time do you eat Thanksgiving dinner?
We ate this year 4:00.
That's the correct time. I think in the 3 to 4 o'clock hour is the correct time. People who do it at like 12:30 in the afternoon, weird. And if you wait until it's like 6:30 at night, it's way too long. You got to smack it in the middle of the afternoon. Everyone can leave wherever they are at like 6 p.m. and get home and pass out on the couch.
I wouldn't mind bumping it up a little bit but then because really starting at 12 o'clock or even 12 o'clock, I'd say no one's eating lunch, but I'm getting hungry. So then all of a sudden hors d'oeuvres start
past hors d'oeuvres,
out. Yeah. I know, but then you're just eating the whole day. I would almost prefer to get 2 meals in. So if I do like at 2 o'clock, that's like smack in the middle of the day. Then come 6 o'clock, I'm ready to go again. And maybe I'm happy at that point to eat the Thanksgiving, because the day 2 meal to me is much better than the day 1 meal.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
And we did a Friendsgiving 2 years ago. And Leanne was going to do a whole like big Thanksgiving thing. And I'm like, let's just make the turkey the day before and serve sandwiches. And everyone could not have been happier. We did like a little sandwich bar with basically what amounted to leftovers from the day before. And everyone enjoyed it 100% more than they would have if it was cooked that day.
Yeah. Well, it's a good one. And with a Friendsgiving, I guess you can kind of alter the plan, right? You could go a little off script. But here's another good thing. I talked to you guys last year. I remember this because I got one of those like way expensive turkeys from the turkey farm.
Oh yeah.
And I went back. I did it again.
Of course you did.
But this year they gave me a free turkey also.
Because you spent like $400 the year before. They were like, this sucker deserves a free turkey.
I saw the car in front of me get a free turkey. Car behind me also got a free turkey. So I guess they had some extras.
What did you do? Oh, they just were giving
I froze
away?
it. I froze it. So we will now have it around Christmas time at some point. So, unit price went way down.
So my quick aside before we get into the mountain of Yankees news is it was 8:30-ish Thanksgiving morning. We still had 68 hours to go before Harrison went back to daycare. And Leanne just on the couch stares at me and goes, I'm done. It was 8:30 in the morning on Thanksgiving morning. And the entire 4-day saga culminated at 5 o'clock on Sunday, and Harrison taking a pair of scissors to my wall in the living room and just cutting it up. Just having a day with a pair of scissors on the wall? On the wall. Just hacking at the wall.
What does that even mean? Okay, so it's like you got a drywall, plaster, whatever. It
was a corner. It was a corner.
Yeah.
And so like an outside corner, not like an inside corner.
Okay.
And he was just taking the scissors. They weren't big scissors. We used them to like trim his hair, so they have like a rounded edge. But they're still scissors, so they can still cut.
If they're cutting hair, they're pretty sharp.
Right. And so he was just going up and down the corner of the wall, making slices like he was carving a turkey, except he was carving up my living room wall.
Okay. Well, here's the good thing. Was anybody hurt?
I was hurt emotionally.
Was anybody hurt physically?
No.
Because when I was a kid, I stuck scissors in my eye because I was that kid. And
At least you didn't do it into your sibling's eye.
That's true. I did not. But yeah, I mean, the wall you can patch a wall.
Can always fix a wall.
can
I
patch
mean,
a wall.
honestly, I was mad because, of course, but I've given up trying to like keep the house like, oh, don't break this, don't do it's impossible. Like there's dents everywhere, there's holes everywhere. Now there's slices in my wall. I'm just gonna
You know what they say?
In 5 years I'm gonna fix everything and sell the house.
What they say is like the most cliche thing ever, but it's probably very true. You're gonna miss those marks on the wall. You're gonna miss those smudges on the window. You're gonna miss the toys all over the goddamn place.
It's probably true.
Yeah. So
yeah,
embrace it.
Embrace it.
Just him figuring things out. Can't cut a wall. Check.
he did do he knew he was wrong. Like he's at that age now where it's like he does something wrong, he knows it. So
yeah,
he
does it anyway because you gotta push the boundaries.
Oh yeah, 20 minutes later, just back to himself, destroying something else. Yeah. Okay, let's here's what we're gonna do today. Couple of news items. Obviously, I was joking about the mountain of news. Jack shit has happened in the past week. But I figured
it's the beginning. It's the setup for the winter meeting.
Calm before the storm. Yeah. I figured it would also be good to go through the offseason moves the Yankees have made in the Brian Cashman era in seasons following missing the playoffs, because it hasn't happened a lot. It's only happened 4 times. And so I think it would be good to go through what they did those off seasons, the season they were coming off of, what they did in those off seasons, and then how it transpired in the season or 2 seasons following. Maybe it can help us understand what the Yankees are going to be doing going forward, because there's a lot of reports. Oh, the Yankees are going to be in on 1 superstar. They're going to get 2 superstars. They're going to get 4 superstars. Blah, 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 blah. Just a lot of talk and quote unquote reports. But it does seem like the smoke around Yoshinobu Yamamoto is he just Yoshi, by the way? Are we calling him Yoshi? Is he going by Yoshi?
I thought it was Yamamoto, honestly. I'm going last name.
Okay, Yamamoto. But I thought in Japan, first names are the surnames.
I don't know. What did we call Tanaka?
Tanaka. But what do we call Ichiro?
Ichiro.
That's his first name.
Cool. No precedent. So I don't know. Maybe it's just go.
We call it, but like Otani goes both ways, right? Like you call him Otani.
Yeah, because you could say Shohei. Yeah. But it's mostly Otani. I
don't
Matsui
know, man. Was always Matsui.
I call people by their last names normally anyway.
Yeah.
But it does change. Like Glaber, I don't call Torres. I call Glaber.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Yamamoto, obviously the top free agent out of Japan, officially posted reports that the Yankees are saving number 18 for him. 18 is like the holy number in Japan. It's what aces wear. Obviously Tanaka wore it. And no one on the Yankees since Benintendi for his half season wore number 18, and they have not handed it out since. So
basically didn't hand it out last year.
Yes. People are speculating, oh, they're saving number 18 for Yamamoto. Okay, great. Like, I'm sure that's going to be a deal breaker. Like, oh, number 18 is not available. I'm not taking your $250 million check.
Well, it wouldn't be that way because they would just make 18 available.
Unless it was with an established player.
Right. Well, there's no one there. So, yeah, it's okay. You know, A-Rod gets mad if they give out 13. Someone else is going to get mad if they give out 18. But if you're a Japanese ace, then it's just, you know, part of the allure, part of the tradition.
Yeah.
With it.
It's interesting because I know
maybe we should look around to see who's got an 18 within the rumored teams that are going after him.
If they have an 18 available.
Yeah, because maybe there's 18 locked up everywhere, and then we just got this massive advantage that nobody even realizes.
And it's not like if the last guy on the bench is wearing 18, it's got to be a starting player, maybe with an established contract or something.
Yeah.
I know you guys had Yamamoto in your offseason plans. And listen, if the Yankees sign Yamamoto, of course, I'm going to be excited. That's adding another awesome arm to the rotation. But that, like, does not sound like a broken record here, but are they missing the mark with targeting pitching? Like, adding Yamamoto to this team doesn't make this team that much better, in my opinion. You've got such a big uphill battle with fixing this offense, fixing these position players. I'm not saying don't sign Yamamoto, but that should not be the priority here.
Well, I mean, you're talking about priorities. It's not like we're hearing what's in the. First of all, with Yamamoto, there's a scheduled process essentially with what he's doing, right?
I
Like
know.
he's taking calls, he's going to take visits, he's going to do a certain thing. It's not like he's around the corner. He is a little bit of a wooing process. So to say that the Yankees are prioritizing Yamamoto over other pieces is, I think, a little unfair, because I don't think that's accurate. And I'm also, we've talked about this when, towards the end of the season, when we're starting to look around and see what's available for next year. Just because the pitching is not the biggest issue doesn't mean they shouldn't upgrade the pitching. It also doesn't mean they shouldn't do both, because they should. And when we're looking at these, we're looking at our offseason plans, and I'm sure you guys were influenced as well, but kind of what we're looking at today, understanding what the Yankees have done in the past after missing the playoffs, I think is relevant, because there is a precedent that the Yankees have stayed on for multiple other
we'll get
strategies.
into that.
But yeah, that's part of it.
But the reason, so here's where I'm coming from. If we are to believe Hal Steinbrenner's comments, where he's like $300 million is not needed to compete for a World Series, and then you sign Yamamoto, we know that puts them closer to that number and limits their flexibility on top of Yamamoto to still stay under 300 million. Now, what we did in our plans was say, F it, we're not staying under 300 million, because this team, maybe it's not needed for any team to go over 300 million, but right now, this team, if the 2024 Yankees are going to compete for a World Series, you have to go over $300 million.
So I hear your statement from Hal talking that you don't need to spend 300 plus million to compete. But then I raise you with his other comment saying 300 is not a cap for us. 300 is not a limit, because he also said that. So which one do you believe? I also
believe one that leads him to spending less money.
But I think he's not wrong. He is not wrong. You should not
he's wrong.
Need to spend 300.
You should not
on a team blank slate.
But this team needs it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why both of us attacked our offseason plans as we did. I mean, we got to similar places as far as what was needed and what was added, just a little different route.
So apparently the Mets, Dodgers, and Giants all have number 18 open. So everyone's been saving number 18 for Yamamoto. It's a conspiracy. So let's get into what the Yankees have done following the missed playoff years, because I think it's a great segue and sort of sets the scene here. So they missed the playoffs in 08, they missed the playoffs in 13, they missed the playoffs in 14, and then again in 16. I'm not going back all the way to the 90s, because Brian Cashman was not the general manager, even if he was there as a assistant or whatever. He was not leading the baseball operations, and I just don't think it's applicable. The first one to talk about is obviously the 08-09 offseason. That's the one everyone points to. CC Sabathia, $161 million. AJ Burnett, $82.5 million. Mark Teixeira, $180 million. They also traded for Nick Swisher. Traded away Wilson Betemit, Jeff Marquez, and Johnny Nunez to the White Sox. And this is sort of a fact I forgot about. Swisher was acquired in early November to be the first baseman. And then later in that winter, I think it was after they had already signed Sabathia and Burnett, Cashman convinced the front office, convinced Steinbrenner, we still need Teixeira. Even though I just acquired Nick Swisher, we need Teixeira. And then what that did was that pushed Nick Swisher to a sort of a outfield first base utility role, because they had Xavier Nady from the season prior, who they acquired from Pittsburgh in 08. And Nady was a good player at that time. And I remember thinking, do I want Nick Swisher or Nady starting? It's probably going to be a platoon. And then Nady went down with an injury. I forget when he went down with an injury. It was either in spring training or very early in the 09 season. And then Swisher was the starting outfielder because Nady went down, and Swisher obviously had a great season and a good little run with the Yankees. But the Yankees, it worked, obviously. They won 103 games, and they were World Series champs after signing the arguably, definitely the two best players on the market, and then A.J. Burnett. I don't know exactly where he ranked at the time on the market, but you signed a number 1 and a number 2 starting pitcher. You signed a number 3 hitter, and you acquired who ended up being your starting right fielder in that season following the playoff miss, adding it to a team that still had a, not in their prime, but still very, very good Jeter, A-Rod, Posada, Pettit, Mariano, and the rest of them. A young Cano. Cano hit like 9th on that team. Like Robinson Cano, who was hitting probably like 315 that season, hit 8th and 9th on that team.
So it's interesting the fact that I forgot also that Swisher was originally signed to be that first baseman.
Acquired. They didn't sign him. They
Acquired him. Okay.
There's a difference.
No, you're right, because it actually leads more into what when Ilya and I were looking at our plan like that. The Brendan Donovan, at one point we wanted him to be that starting second baseman, and by the end of our conversations and looking around and looking at payroll and all these things, we ended up deciding that we still need him, but he doesn't need to be the second baseman. And this is kind of like keeping Glaber there. That was one of because we were trying to ship Glaber. We were looking at everything to ship Glaber at one point to see what you could get.
We tried too, and it's just
the value just ended up being there. But a guy like Donovan, who is similar to what we're talking about right now with Swisher, does have the ability to mold around. And he doesn't need to be a starting player per se in a starting lineup on opening day to be a very effective player that contributes almost every single day to the New York Yankees because of the roster flexibility that is needed for, again, the plug that we have at DH in Giancarlo Stanton. And like I've said in the past, you almost need to go into this coming season as if he doesn't exist. He will be there at DH, but if you prepare this team for him not being there, it gives you the ability and flexibility to, if he comes out of the gate and looks like the same dude and is hitting below the Mendoza line and striking out all the time, you can't play him. And you got to be prepared for that, because that is a very real possibility. It may be the end. It's possible, because a guy like that, as big as he is, with the type of swing that he has, if he cannot catch up to a fastball, and that just continues to be a problem as the season goes on, and it'll probably be worse as the season goes on, and as bumps and bruises happen, then you got to have a contingency plan that's not okay, and that's not sitting in AAA or sitting on the waiver wire from
that's
some
not
other
a
team.
replacement level player, which is what they feel. Not even replacement level, like below replacement level players. Which
you need an everyday player to be able to go in there and be an effective player.
Because it's not just that Stanton could suck again; he could be hurt at any moment. He could start the season on the IL for all we know.
There's a lot of things that can go wrong.
The other problem that Stanton causes is because his name is Giancarlo Stanton and he's got a massive contract, he automatically gets slotted into a middle of the order spot.
Which is so stupid.
It's so stupid, but it's true. Just because his name is Giancarlo Stanton, he's hitting cleanup, and then you look on the scoreboard and he's hitting 189. It's like, what?
Yeah, no, it's a black hole in the middle of a non-productive lineup. When we wonder why they don't score runs, people are like, oh, RBIs don't matter. They kind of do matter, and to a point. Like it does tell part of the story about what's happening on the base path, and then what your production
sound like Aaron Judge.
What your quote production players are able to do. And so yes, it does tell a story. It absolutely tells more of a macro story of what's happening with an offense. Well, so you got to prepare. And like Swisher, like for this one, they did that. They went over and beyond for the position players. And that's not something you can always do on the pitching side. You can get really top heavy in pitching. And I think that's the most effective way to go. But it's very difficult to have pitching depth on the starting rotation unless you have young guys with options.
That 08 team still had A-Rod, Jeter. They had Cano, who was entering his prime. Okay. They didn't need 5 position players. They needed 1 position player. They had a hole at first base because the Giambi era was over and Giambi couldn't even play first base by the end of his contract, but they had a hole at first base, and that's what they signed Teixeira for, and that's what they acquired Nick Swisher for. The Yankees, this current Yankees, they have holes in 4 spots in the starting lineup.
Yeah, so I'm not saying it's one guy. It's not apples to apples where it's one person. There's multiple pieces that you need to go. But you could say there's 2 big additions that you need to bring in. Well, you better bring that third one in too, because that person better have some flexibility, because you're going to need optionality throughout the season. Boone is going to need that. Old man Brad Ausmus is going to need that.
Okay, we got to talk about that. So you dropped that Instagram video of. Was a Yes Network interview that Brad Ausmus was doing?
First of all, I did not even look at the comments until after you said that.
Oh my God, they were so funny. The comments, I immediately went to the comments. So
and I feel bad, because if this is actually the way that this man is aging, then, it's just unfortunate. But yeah,
so
it looks like an age filter.
It looks like an age filter. The wrinkles are off the charts. And it's like, he's a handsome guy, right? Like Brad Ausmus is a handsome guy. He's got a nice head of hair. Yeah. And it's like, man, those wrinkles, they made him age just like in dog years in a
I don't
matter
know,
of
dude. I
seconds.
kind of think that like maybe I don't know how old if he has kids or how old they are, but I feel like someone was just fucking with him and put the old man filter on
Yeah.
before the call.
Yeah. And he had no clue. He's like,
he had
whatever,
no idea.
iPhone. Yeah.
He had no one wanted to say anything. They're like, is it not? I don't know. These AI filters are very realistic looking, so you can't tell.
And then the comments on that video were just like, oh, man, the Yankees age people. It's just so funny. Oh my God. He should I don't know, he should embrace that, turn it into a t-shirt or something, just wear that as a t-shirt at spring training.
I'm sure he loves. I'm sure he's really happy about it too. It's something he can completely control. Sucks. Getting old sucks.
Yeah, well, getting old that fast especially sucks. He said that he never saw Boone make a move that seemed questionable to him. He said those words.
Now I question him. Great.
So he watched every single move Aaron Boone made.
They just gave a highlight reel. He was in a minute and a half of his calls.
Ausmus was in a dugout on teams the past 5 years, so he wasn't watching Aaron Boone day in and day out. Because I can point to dozens and dozens of questionable moves. I'm not even saying wrong, just I question that move.
Yeah. What kind of a comment is that anyway? Yeah, it's not like you're watching everything the guy's doing. Studying film on the manager and what the decisions that he made throughout the year. How do you even do that?
Yeah. All right. Let's get back to the matter at hand here, which is so clearly the moves in the 08-09 offseason worked, and they worked for a couple seasons. The Yankees were still at the top of the league through the 2012 season. They made the playoffs all those years. They went to the ALCS 2 times in those years. They never got back to the World Series after 2009 though. And then the wheels fell off. The retirement tours started. Everyone aged. Alex Rodriguez was kicking down Mike Francesa's door, getting suspended for steroids. Derek Jeter had a broken ankle. It was ugly. The 2013 season, the Yankees won 85 games. It was Mariano and Pettit's final year. And then Cano also hit free agency. He left for Seattle. The Yankees offered him $175 million. He ended up signing in Seattle for $240-ish million. So big gap there. So what the Yankees did is they pivoted. They still spent a boatload of money.
When Jay-Z disrespected the Yankees in New York.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
That was the first time New Yorkers were upset with Jay-Z because he was with Rock Nation. That was like one of their first big clients, I think.
It was. And then, you can say in hindsight that move worked out for the Yankees because of the steroid stuff with Cano.
I'll still believe that they smelled the smoke. They knew that there was smoke. They knew something was coming.
But Cano was absolutely the best player on the team at that time and absolutely the best player on the market at that time. And the Yankees let him walk and instead signed Brian McCann for $85 million, Jacoby Ellsbury for $153 million, which I don't care when that happened. I know it was a couple days before Cano, was 1,000%, in my opinion, a reaction to Cano not signing with the Yankees. And Carlos Beltran for 3 years and $45 million. They offered Shin-Soo Choo $140 million. Didn't happen because where did Choo end up signing? Texas. Choo wanted to Boris wanted more money than Carl Crawford got the season before for Shin-Soo Choo. The Yankees then
talk about greedy, man. You got Carl Crawford, that contract, which was one of the worst contracts, and then you're like, let's beat that one. This worked out for the team. Yeah, this is a win for everybody.
And so the Yankees pivoted, ended up getting Beltran instead. So they were going to sign Shin-Soo Choo and Jacoby Ellsbury potentially that offseason. They signed Tanaka, of course, as well, $155 million. They brought in Brian Roberts to replace Robinson Cano. That's good. Let's go from the best second baseman in baseball.
Yeah, be careful with the word replace.
To a very old Brian Roberts in his yellow contacts.
I was going to say he had the orange cheating contacts, so he could see the ball really clearly.
And it just was a disaster. It in a vacuum, these moves, it's like Brian McCann, good player. Carlos Beltran, still a useful player at that time. Jacoby Ellsbury, not a bad player at the time, but definitely not worth that contract. They just spent so much money on B-level free agents, and the team didn't gel. They were not good. The rest of the team was old, had too many holes. You had Andrew Jones out there, Vernon Wells out there. Remember the hodgepodge that the lineup was?
You said they spent money on B-level free agents. You're talking about the Vernon Wells of the world, right? You're not calling Ellsbury and
No, I'm calling Ellsbury, Beltran, and McCann B-level free agents because
but
the
they
A-level
weren't at the time.
A-level free agent was Robinson Cano. Okay.
Ellsbury was definitely an A-level free agent at the time.
Obviously, but he wasn't as good of a player. None of these guys were as good as players as Robinson Cano, and they played different positions, right? So it's hard. It's not an apples to apples comparison. But I remember thinking this at the time. I was going to say I remember saying this at the time, but unfortunately, we were not doing the podcast back then. But I do know we talked about this all the way in 2015.
Maybe you wrote an article about it.
I probably did write an article about it. If you can still find BronxPinstripes.com articles.
Oh, you can. They come up pretty high in Google
from
actually.
2013. You can still find articles about this. Robinson Cano was unquestionably the Yankees' best player and definitely the best free agent player on the market. And instead, what the Yankees did was they got players who were lesser than. And a lot of times when you take lesser than players, you're still paying a boatload of money for them. It doesn't work out for you. It didn't work out for the Yankees. And if this had been any other franchise, not any other, but most other franchises, you spend, what's that, $400 million in free agent contracts, and only one of them work out? Tanaka definitely worked out. Beltran, they had to trade away. That was not a massive contract, but
I can't say that the Beltran deal didn't work out.
He was pretty mediocre for them. He had average seasons. Ellsbury was obviously a complete disaster. And Brian McCann had some okay seasons, but they ended up shipping him to Houston in the final year to make way for Gary Sanchez and also to offload a few extra bucks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny because I was listening to MLB radio on the way in here this morning. And it was Steve Phillips and who's the guy that does ESPN, Eduardo.
Perez.
Anyway, they were talking about this exact conversation about when you're a GM in a small market compared to a GM in a big market, the expectations and like everything is different. Phillips was talking about his conversations with Billy Beane, and Billy Beane was like, I don't envy you because you have to go out and look at these massive free agents. You're buying the guys who are striking at the highest. Yeah. Well, and Bean's like, I just got to find diamonds in the rough. And if I miss,
and if they miss,
there's no expectation. Yeah. But when you're in a big market, you got to go out and find the best players, and they have to work out. Otherwise there's big scrutiny. But to your point, the scrutiny was there, but it didn't do anything. There were no changes in a lot of other places, especially 3-4 years later, when you're looking back at those contracts, once they're finished and nothing really has changed all that much.
No, they got worse.
You would think that person and that regime would be on the hook for, the decisions that they had made, and they just weren't. So in a lot of other big markets, you get the axe at that point. You do.
Oh yeah. Any other market, if you have an offseason that disastrous as a GM, you're fired 3 years later.
Yeah. It's pretty close to when like you have a certain amount of time to fix it, one or two mistakes that happen within the contract time frame, and Cashman just couldn't do it. And we saw what's happening here. He's still in charge. He's still in charge of the decisions that are being made, and in every other place, for the most part, that person is replaced with a new thought process.
And obviously, a key difference in between the 08-09 offseason and the 13-14 is that the 13-14 team around those free agent signings was not good, whereas the team around the 08-09 team was still good, still had Hall of Fame talent playing at top levels. And then in 13-14, like I said, it was a hodgepodge roster. Somehow they won 84 games. I think honestly the talent level on that team was probably a below 500 record, but they did get to 84 wins, missed the playoffs. So they're coming off back-to-back missed seasons of playoffs. In the 14-15 offseason, this was Jeter's final year. Completely different offseason. Tons of moves, but completely different in tone and what their team was trying to accomplish. They traded for Justin Wilson from Pittsburgh for Francisco Cervelli, so a left-handed bullpen arm with team control. They traded for Didi Gregorius for Shane Green from Arizona, trying to replace Derek Jeter. Now, this worked out tremendously, but I don't think the plan was Didi is going to turn into an everyday shortstop. I think it was like, let's just do this to bide some time until we can maybe sign someone else at shortstop.
Was Jorge Mateo still in the system at that point?
Still in the system. He was their
the
top prospect in the system at that time. He was one of their top prospects.
And Eduardo Nunez, I know, was a guy that they had.
He was already on the team. Nunez was on the team in like 2012, 13.
No, I know, but he was the guy that was supposed to be groomed behind him as Jeter was still there, and it just didn't work out.
Nunez could hit. He couldn't field.
Nunez could hit a little bit, but yeah, nothing.
Nunez was a decent offensive player.
Not a full-time player.
And then he left the Yankees and became a better offensive player.
Yeah, and his helmet was never on his head.
Then they traded, you're going to love this one. They traded for Nathan Eovaldi, Domingo Germán, and Garrett Jones to Miami for Martin Prado and David Phelps.
I mean, at the end, honestly, freaking steal.
Great trade. Too bad. Great trade. Too bad how those players worked out for the Yankees. But yeah, great trade. And I did like Martin Prado because he was like a pretty solid everyday player.
He was an older guy at that point too.
Yeah, maybe.
34, 35.
No, I would say like 30.
Okay, I think older, but
let's look it up. Let's get on that. Traded for Johnny Barbado to Barbado for Sean Kelly from the Padres. Traded for David Carpenter. Now this is interesting. David Carpenter and Chase and Strafe. He was 30. Fucking nailed it for Martin Prado. Traded for Manny Benuelos to Atlanta for David Carpenter and Chase and Shreve. And now I talked about this in the Brian Cashman history episode, but man, oh man, this offseason could have been a hell of a lot different if this blockbuster trade had gone down. So another trade that was being seriously discussed with the Braves was Aaron Judge, Luis Severino, Gary Sanchez, and Manny Benuelos, and Ian Clarkin.
Literally every prospect.
Top 5 prospects in the system to Atlanta for Jason Hayward, who had one more year of team control, Andrelton Simmons, David Carpenter, who they ended up acquiring, BJ Upton, and Chris Johnson. Wow.
Oh my God, it would have been such a, I mean, not to say that any of this, that would have been such a disaster. Could you imagine what the Braves look like today with that?
Can you imagine how good,
just pluck Aaron Judge out of
but can you imagine how good Gary Sanchez would have been if he was mentored by the Braves?
Yeah, probably. They do churn out catchers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And Aaron Judge still would have been Aaron Judge, and maybe Luis Severino still would have had all those injury problems or not. I don't know. They re-signed my boy Chase Headley, negative exit velocity himself, Mr. Chase Headley, to a 4-year, $52 million contract, who they acquired at the deadline in 2014. That's honestly not a bad signing. They needed a third baseman, and he was
a fine third baseman, and
fine third baseman at the time.
While he didn't have power, he got on base.
Then Andrew Miller, 4 years, $36 million, and then a bunch of just guys. Stephen Drew, who. How many hours do you think we spent talking about Stephen Drew on the podcast back in 2015? 50? 50 hours? Many. Did we spend 50 hours talking about Stephen Drew?
We talked about the fact that he was taking time away from Rob Refsnyder and the ability to play second base because he was the prospect at the time, which is just sad when you think back on it. Yeah, way too much time talking about Stephen Drew. He was a black. I hated him. I hated Stephen Drew,
and he only made $5 million. It
wasn't even Stephen Drew's fault. It was really nothing personal.
Playing.
It was the fact that he was there, the fact that he was brought in there, and the fact that he was blocking the guy that I wanted to play.
Do you know what's funny? I bet if we look at his numbers, we'd be like, yeah, that's like everybody on the Yankees right now.
Yeah. Same with Refsnyder playing in the outfield in Boston, who actually turned out to be a decent role player.
Okay, so Stephen Drew in 2015 with the Yankees. Okay, yeah, he was pretty bad. 201 batting average, 271 on base percentage, 77 OPS.
271 on base percentage.
But that's like half of the Yankees lineup.
I know, it's just but that's the reality of what that is it's upsetting.
And then they signed also.
And they put Rob Refsnyder at third base. That poor bastard. They tried to put him at third base, and
then
he just
remember,
got eaten up.
2 years ago, Rob Refsnyder was like, "Yeah, the Yankees kept trying to make me an infielder, whereas I'm an outfielder."
Yeah.
Chris Capuano, Chris Young also signed. The Yankees in 2015, they definitely had a bit of a surprising season. They did make the playoffs, 87 wins. I think they were in first place at the trade deadline in that season and then completely fell flat down the stretch. They still limped into the playoffs, lost to the Astros in the wild card.
It was at the
A-Rod,
Tanaka game that was like, we knew if he gave up
it gave up
2
one
runs,
run, and then
yeah,
he gave up like a 2-run home run in the second inning, and
that's
it was over.
it.
The
Can't
Yankees
score
couldn't hit.
runs.
Dallas Keuchel
Same
gave
problem.
up like nothing. The Yankees won 87 games that year. Teixeira had a bit of a renaissance. Actually, A-Rod had the renaissance, the erodescence that year. And
when
then,
he actually fell into the decent graces of good graces, I'd say, of Yankees fans. I
because
didn't fall
he
for it.
seemed
I
seemed
did
like
not
a
fall for it.
but he seemed like a human being. Like
Nah.
and he was like mentoring some young kids. He was having fun. He had like an insane amount of game-winning hits that year. Like actually very clutch that season for the Yankees. I remember a game in Minnesota. He hit 3 home runs, and like the Yankees were down. Like every home run like tied the game for the Yankees. Like he had a good year. That was fun. That was the most fun I've ever had with Alex Rodriguez in my entire life. Was 2015. Maybe 09 playoffs, but
09 playoffs were pretty good.
yeah, but like that was, I can say, oh, Jeter was still there and Mariano and CC, but like no, 15 A-Rod. That was a fun A-Rod. Okay, so that offseason they went in, they made the playoffs in 15, but then they reverted back in 16. Missed the postseason that year. 84 wins. A-Rod and Teixeira, that was their final year. A-Rod in August did that retirement ceremony the next day. Aaron Judge and Tyler Austin come up. Mark Teixeira retired at the end of that year as well. And then that offseason, the Yankees traded for Albert Abreu and Jorge Guzman.
Well, hold on. Before you even get to the offseason, though, like that there was a different sentiment going into that offseason because of the success that we saw from the kids. Like the young and
it was
dumb
really Sanchez. I mean, Sanchez was Sanchez, but all world.
But it was a young and dumb phase where all of a sudden, like they shouldn't have been competing, but they were competing, and they started making a run. And yes, Gary Sanchez was, the numbers were Babe Ruth plus in the last month in September. He had some stupid month. So okay, but there was a different feeling going into that offseason, understanding that, because I think at that point when A-Rod left, like everybody was ready for that to happen too. Like, okay, changing of the guard.
Oh, yeah.
It was
he was bad in 2016. He wasn't good.
It was a clean changing of the guard. Literally one day leaves, next day Judge walks in, hits home runs, and it was just very clear what was going on. And then there was success. So, there was a lot of excitement. We were extremely excited going into that 17th season. And then when they go around and they add
I think you're having a little bit of revisionist history. We definitely enjoyed what they did in the 16 deadline. They acquired all those prospects and they played pretty good with young players in the second half of the season, even though they were never really in playoff contention. But I don't think we truly expected going into the 17th season for them to be a playoff team. I think we're like, yeah, maybe they could be a wild card team if everything goes right. But
18,
I don't think
18 was the circled year. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. 18 was the circled year because of Gleyber Torres and Clint Frazier and at the time Justice Sheffield and even Aaron Judge. We were like, what is Aaron Judge going to be? He struck out 50% of the time and then got hurt. Like he might be nothing. And he hit eighth on opening day 2017. Okay. A month later, he was the best player in baseball, but we didn't know that.
Yeah, but here's what you're missing. I specifically remember, you go back to listen to any of those podcasts. I promise you there was a lot of excitement from us because it was different. It was kids coming up.
I'll give you that.
It was different. They actually identified. It was also, not only did we see young players competing, but we saw a different mentality from the front office for the first time ever. They sold at the deadline, but what they did is they didn't sell to completely regroup and like tank. They retooled at the same time with young guys that had high, like when we saw when Clint Frazier came over in that deal, we were very excited because of the prospect status of him. There was a lot of hype. There was a lot of allure, fastest hands east of the Mississippi. Like this guy was going to be the guy. So there was a lot of excitement going into 17. And then what they did is they started building around it. And what it felt like at the time, and I don't, this is not revisionist history. I remember feeling this in the moment. I remember thinking that, okay, they have a young nucleus of players that can be very good. And obviously Gary Sanchez peaked or, when it was starting his peak, which would then pretty quickly, swiftly decline. But it felt like they were building a nucleus, a quote core four, and then they were going to assemble veteran players around them, the Matt Hollidays of the world, to then, usher them to hopefully, move a little quicker, which did happen. our expectations were not playoffs, or expectations were not, World Series or bust in 17 by any means. But damn, did that change as we saw what the product became, and how they started, evolving much quicker. So yeah, it was
because
a feeling.
the moves that they made were none of is not that exciting of an offseason that they made. They, like I said, they traded for Albert Abreu and Jorge Guzman for Brian McCann to Houston, which was also kind of just like a salary dump. They traded for Zach Littell, for James Pazos to the Mariners, and then Littell was traded. I totally forgot Jaime Garcia.
Yeah.
Jaime Garcia was a Yankee in the middle of the 17 season, but they traded Littell, who's now like pretty good years later, to Minnesota. They signed Holiday, like you said, 1 year, $13 million.
Isn't it just Little?
I thought it was Littell.
I don't know.
Chapman was the big one. That was a bit of a surprise because they had just traded him away and they still had Betances and Miller in the bullpen.
But that became BMC. That became them saying, okay, we have this young nucleus. Let's completely lock down the back half of the bullpen, because now we're going to shorten the game. And we're hopefully going to continue to see progress from our young guys, but have a lockdown bullpen. And unfortunately, they stayed with that for too long and stopped developing and stopped bringing in opportunities to fix what was slowly going wrong with their offensive players. They made bad decisions, and really, I think, doubled down too much on it was a reactive move for sure, based on what we saw in Kansas City. I think it was one of those trends where Kansas City, the Royals, built that monster bullpen, and then Cashman copied it straight up. He copied it, and they didn't have the gelling of the offense that they needed and the offensive, or I'm sorry, the pitching to get to that bullpen for it to work.
Yeah, and we just totally missed something. So Andrew Miller was traded already. Andrew Miller was traded to
in 16. Yeah. Why 16, did I put Chapman?
we forgot. So
because he was traded and then re-signed.
Chapman was traded and then re-signed. Miller was traded, but he had more control than Chapman. So the Cleveland kept him that following year. Miller was still under contract with Cleveland. So the Yankees really only had Dellin Betances in the bullpen. So they did sign Chapman to come back.
So that was the double down. That was the double down, though, trying to get that BMC back is what it was. Because the BMC didn't, it worked to a point. Like, they had a dominant bullpen, there's no doubt, but it didn't take them to where they needed to be.
Because they didn't have the rest of the team. But when they signed back Chapman, we were all like, great, but it's probably for, like we said, 2018, circling the 2018 calendar, as we're going to need a lockdown closer for 2 years from now, not this year. Obviously, it ended up being that they needed him for 17 season as well. They signed Chris Carter to a 1-year deal,
history,
coming off of a National League home run king.
Signed it with his eyes closed.
And Eovaldi was DFA'd.
Yeah, and then signed with Tampa for a 2-year deal. It was because he was injured, and they didn't feel like dealing with the rehab, right?
Yeah, he had surgery.
He was going to be out the following year, and then Tampa signed him to a 2-year deal. Was it? They were really just like giving him a 2-year deal for 1 year.
Was Tampa his first stop, and then Boston, and then
for sure.
And then so the Yankees won 91 games that year. They were better than anyone expected. They had an awesome postseason run, lost in the ALCS, and then the Yankees have not missed a playoff since until this year. So, as we've talked through each of these seasons and how the Yankees reacted, it's mostly been aggressive. I think, with the exception of the 16-17 season, that wasn't aggressive. That was more still medium term looking. You can't be medium term looking with this team. You need to be aggressive, because the window is not 5 years. The window is short. It's closing. And so you have to be aggressive this winter. Seems like
and also they didn't do what they needed to do in 18 either after 17 happened. For me, the biggest problem with the way that the Yankees handled that time when they missed the playoffs, it had nothing to do with 17. Like, it worked. They were aggressive in the sense that they went out and got Chapman back, signed him. They have a closer now. That was done in their minds. And then they started adding pieces around it, but they were looking at their young guys to do this. And then development stopped with them, and they didn't add the pieces around those players that they needed to, and then just leaned on, the hope that all of these young guys were going to completely work out, and they started declining. And if you don't think that that, that has to do with the way that the game was managed, the way that the players developed underneath the skipper of the team, then fine. Maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you don't believe that much power and that much responsibility and that much effectiveness, goes down to the team for the skipper. But there was a culture change. There was no doubt a culture change from 17 to 18 when Boone came in and Girardi went out. And I think it was very bad for this team, for this young team. I think that the Girardi type of managing I think we would have seen different results. I'm not saying injuries wouldn't have happened, but I think we would have had different results. Looking back, Gary Sanchez needed that structure. He needed that discipline, I think, for him to capture the type of player that he wanted to be. And, best friend, dad, Aaron Boone, who's just trying to be the cool guy, it didn't work. And whether you directly think those two are correlated, that's for you to think. But I believe that is a part of the puzzle that went wrong.
You said the culture change, that's definitely a factor, but also how they acted the offseason after the 17 season is they pivoted to Stanton instead of, it would have been the next year when they could have signed Harper or Machado.
Yes.
It's all easy Stanton, to second guess.
Yeah.
It's all easy to say. It's very easy to second guess because it didn't work out.
But the easy second guess, the one that, like, to me, I don't like looking at, was when you see a young team overachieving deep into the playoffs, and then you get rid of the person in charge of that team. It doesn't make any sense to me. And the fact that the Yankees at that point, and I understand we had our problems with Girardi too, and maybe at that point we're like, okay, this, now we got all the guys, let's bring in the right person to capture it all. Looking back, it was the wrong move. They needed the baseball guy in the building that had been there, done that, developed players in the past.
Well, like we've said a million times, the decision to move on from Joe Girardi at that point was made in August. It wasn't made after they got bounced from the playoffs in October.
It's such a problem
just like
this organization.
Just like most likely the decision to keep Aaron Boone was made in August of this year,
right?
Even if they're going to say publicly, no, we were evaluating everything after the season.
Yeah. Or based on the fact that they had 2 more wins and didn't have a losing record.
No, because I think all the way back to August, they were already lining up the excuses for why this team did not perform. The injury excuse, the underachievement excuse, all those things. Nothing to do with Aaron Boone. And so he was just there. I mean, frankly, he was managing crap by August. Like, the team was so terrible. No manager. You could have Casey Stengel, Joe Torre, Joe Girardi, whoever you want as manager. No one was going to win with that team.
Yeah. So I know we did our GM plans, but prediction wise, and seeing all of the underlying rumors and people talking in alleys, do you believe that they are going to go after? Because to me, the Yamamoto thing does feel real. It feels like there is momentum in that. It feels like a Cashman move.
Because it's easy also.
But if they do that, the thing that we were talking about, the storyline that we were talking about as we started the show, that can't be the only move. You need to go out and make an offensive move, also feels very real. So if they are to do that,
you need to make 3 position player moves.
But if they sign the pitcher, like, I do believe they're going to go get a big bat. I 100% believe that.
One big bat doesn't, I even said in my GM plans.
You can't go into it signing the pitcher and then not address the offense.
Of course not.
But
my fear is that they're going to say, we're going to spend $230 million on Yamamoto. So now let's go try and plug some holes with some position players. And what we're going to be left with is a pretty good rotation next year and a bunch of losses 4-2.
Yeah, it's the same. Go back to, what was it, 15 when Tanaka lost the wild card? You can't score in the playoffs. That's the problem with this team. It's been the problem with this team.
And even if they sign Yamamoto and then they make some moves on the position player front and then they get the one big bat, say it's Cody Bellinger, that's not enough to fix this offense. You need multiple big bats. He will be here
for 6 years, 7 years.
You need multiple big bats, multiple good hitters, good all-star level hitters to fix this offense.
Yeah. And not all or nothing guys either. You need balanced.
And my fear is that you spend $230 million on Yamamoto. You're not going to do that. You're not going to have the flexibility. It's going to come back to, well, we don't need to spend $340 million to win a World Series. We can do it with this. And if Brian Cashman truly does have a budget and say it's $300 million and he says, I'm going to go sign Yamamoto and then try and plug holes with position players, he's never been able to do that. He's never been able to get a all-star level offense with below all-star. No one can do it. You need talent. You need to sign talent at the end of the day. You need talent on your roster. They don't have it.
And there's too many question marks with said talent that is there. Yes, you could make a best case scenario with the guys that are here, but that best case scenario has a very low percentage of actually hitting.
Right. What are the chances that Giancarlo Stanton plays 140 games and hits 35 home runs? 5%?
In the mind of the brass of the New York Yankees, it should be 0% in their minds.
Agree.
0%. Go
in
out
my
and
opinion,
fix the problem as if he's not here.
In my opinion, the likelihood that Stanton rebounds into a great hitter, LeMahieu is healthy all season and a great hitter, Rizzo rebounds healthy all season.
Speaking of, before we end the show, Rizzo, I was scrolling Twitter and saw a Twitter profile that had a video. I don't know where they originally got the video, but there wasn't much action on it. So I retweeted the video because I saw Rizzo in a cage, and then I looked at the guy he's working with. I'm like, wait a minute, that's Judge. That's Hitter Man. That's Judge's hitting coach that fixed his swing in 16, 17. I'm like, that's really interesting. Now we
Rizzo should have put that on the list of off-season moves.
Well, you know, there's an influence there. Obviously, there's a big trust. There's still a trust with Aaron Judge and the coach. Like, there's still a relationship. There's still a coach. Who's Judge's best friend on the team? Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo now working with the same guy that helped him. So you're looking at that and you're like, that is an interesting scenario and why it's happening. Before Rizzo had the head injury, he was having an all-star season. He was having a fantastic year.
Yes, he was. He absolutely was.
But I'm wondering now, looking at these adjustments, one of the biggest adjustment that Aaron Judge made was keeping that bat on plane and in the zone longer so that he had the ability to make more contact with balls, whether he was late or he was early, he was still making contact. And I wonder how much of this now, maybe tweaking in the way that Rizzo is approaching the plate is, hey, maybe I'm not getting back that speed. Maybe I'm not getting back that quickness that I once had or the reaction. So I need to prepare myself and prepare my swing so that I'm longer in the zone so that it's not as much of a factor on the production side. That's a direct correlation to me to what we saw with his head injury. And, maybe that's just him being proactive and saying, if it isn't there, like, this will help me stay in the zone longer, on plane longer to make impact on the ball more often. But nonetheless, very interesting.
So last thing I want to say, and I think this kind of illustrates the point that we're both making. In a best case dream world scenario where Stanton is a good player next year, Rizzo is a good player next year, DJ is a good player next year, the Yankees would still need a starting center fielder and a starting left fielder.
Yeah.
And the chances of all three of those guys doing that is what? Less than 5%, you would say? All three of them together doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, go into it with a 0% because the Stanton to me is not happening.
Which is why the Yankees.
And if he does, amazing. If he does, amazing. Like he
right. It's a lottery.
He transcended what everybody thought. Then cool. Then, give him his flowers for working his ass off and figuring it out. And hopefully he can sustain it. But again, you cannot expect that to happen or rely on it to happen and base your moves for this upcoming season around anything having to do with Giancarlo Stanton in a productive role on this team.
Right, which is why you need minimum 3 very good starting position players in order to make this team competitive next year.
And one of them better have some flexibility in where they can play.
Right. So Yamamoto's great. I can't wait for him to don number 18 and the pinstripes and hopefully be a 1A behind Garrett Cole. But if they don't get some position players, he's going to lose a bunch of games 3-1. And that ain't going to be fun.
Yep.
All right. We will, Logan, you got something?
Yeah, I think it's funny quick. So I found an article on BronxPinstripes.com from 10 years ago.
Okay.
Titled, I Do Not Understand What the Yankees Are Doing by
Is
Andrew
it me?
Rotondi.
Yes.
Talking about when Cano signed with the Mariners, and talking about how the Yankees are going to be rebuilding, but they shouldn't be because they make all their money in the playoffs. And then you said, so this leads me to 2 conclusions. You were pretty right. The Yankees think they can make the postseason without Robbins and Cano. Well, this is probably true. I don't think anyone would argue the Yankees are a better team without Cano. If their goal is to win championships, Cano helps them achieve this goal, no matter what his contract terms are. But if the Yankees are more concerned with turning a profit, letting Cano walk was the right move. And then you said the Yankees place more value in Jacoby Ellsbury than they do in Robinson Cano. This is just preposterous. Cano has missed 14 games since 2007, and Ellsbury has missed 290 games since 2008. So you called that one.
Yeah.
Injury guys.
Pat on the back for my past
Andrew's a big
self.
injury guy.
10 years ago.
We should revisit
And I've been
these
I've been consistent about that point. I didn't even know I wrote that. I don't remember I have no recollection of that 10 years ago. Might have been 100 years ago. But I've been consistent. Clearly.
Oh no, this
I hate to
article,
say this.
I read
Cody
it.
Bellinger feels a little like the Ellsbury signing. That's just my
No,
gut.
okay. So
It's
thank
just
you
my
for
gut.
bringing
It feels
did
a little
I-
like that.
So thank you for bringing this up. Simon Brundish tweeted
Yeah,
me.
and I completely shit on it immediately with the response that I gave you in there. How many games did he play last year? Tell me. How many games did he miss?
I don't remember. He's
played
missed
like 130.
15% of games in his career.
He missed 30 games last year.
Okay.
What have you done for Emilio? On the season that he had the rebound, he missed 30 games.
But he was
out for
also
a month, and then whether that was days off or whether those were.
I'm not sitting here
load
telling
management.
you Cody Bellinger is the safest of all signings.
If you sign Cody Bellinger to be the starting center fielder and he's missing 30 games, that's a problem.
If he's hitting like he did in the other games and on the field the rest of the time, it's not as big of a problem as they have with nothing in center field.
It's a lot of games to miss if you're getting a contract to come in to be the everyday center fielder. That's an everyday center fielder.
I agree with you. If you miss a
bullshit,
month,
if you're coming in to be the every other day center fielder or the 2 out of 3 day center fielder, no, you need to be signed for the everyday center field job. We need dependence.
30
up the
games
middle,
is too many.
Up the middle. Good baseball teams are built up the middle. You need a solid battery, and you need a strong center fielder, and you need strong middle infielders. Defensively, that's how baseball teams should
great.
be
Well, they
built.
have none of that right now.
Well, when you're missing 30 games and you're putting some other guy out there or 5 other guys out there, or you have to move over now Aaron Judge into center field more often and then increase his risk factor of getting injured. It's not what it should be. It's not what you want. You need an everyday
they
guy.
have
and his
right now.
injury
They don't
worries
have
me.
a center fielder.
I understand.
All right.
Go get Leo.
Yes, I think a fun exercise for this offseason. Let's just revisit some old articles that we wrote. I don't think you wrote any articles, but
I didn't write a lot.
I would like to revisit some articles I wrote because that one, I think I nailed it.
It's pretty good.
All right. We'll talk to you guys next week.